Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to do a panel on role-playing because there's a lot of people in this convention and come to this convention who know about role-playing, and it seemed to be daft that we'd never had one, so I thought I'd organise one. I was given a list by Gary of all the people who were interested in role-playing, and I wrote that down as a list of people to ask to get 2 or 3 people, and they all said yes. So don't think they were given the choice. So I wanted something about how we do role-playing and systems and so forth. I don't want this to be a panel about anecdotes and funny things that happen.
Well, that's just boring. All right, we quit.
It's designed for me to jump up at the end and go, but you can just make it up. But please, ladies and gentlemen, for the role players who want to introduce themselves, the role player.
I'm Gary. Just a dodgy role
It's not that kind of meeting, Gary.
Are you sure?
I know, it's Armadacon.
Really, Armadacon is just a self-help group for us. So, my name is Gary. I am a role player.
Hello, Gary.
I role-played this week. I started, in fact, my first experience as a role-playing was as a GM, way back in the 80s with Tunnels and Trolls. I dropped out of it, and then I came back into it when I went to school. It wrecked my 6th form, explained my bad A-level results. But I've been role-playing. I started with Tunnels and Trolls D&D, and I've done so many systems. In fact, I've reached the stage where I don't do much D&D anymore because there's so many wonderful systems out there, and some of my players who are in the audience have suffered, many of them. So, yeah. Sam.
Hi, I'm Sam, and I'm a role player. I started playing D&D specifically about going on 12 years ago now. It started out just as like this nerdy oasis of, in the middle of the week while I was in drama school, and from there it's just sort of expanded out. Unlike Gary, I started out playing rather than GMing, but weirdly kind of relating back to the something that on the previous panel about how bad books teach you as much about good writing as good ones do. Bad GMs teach you as much about good role-playing as good ones do. And I've been fortunate enough, I haven't had that many bad GMs in my time playing, but the ones that I have had, I had the moment of, yeah, well, I could probably do better than that. And then did, and ended up as as the Forever GM in various different groups that I've been part of. But then from D&D, I spread out into various other different systems. I won't bore you with all of them, but the point being is that a thing that I think all of them really have in common is that they're all story-based. Like if I'm going to be trying to sell it to a person who's never done it before, I'll just say, it's improvisation with dice. And we're all trying to tell a story.
I'm telling the story.
Go on.
Right, so my...
No.
We've set precedent now.
I'm Data. Real name's Norman. So I'm Norman. I've been doing roleplay now for 7 years, I think it must be. I am the rookie in comparison to these people here.
It just means he's younger than we are.
Yeah, he's not called you old.
My D&D world kind of developed later because when I moved to Plymouth, the opportunity arose, whereas back home in Surrey we didn't have the community kind of aspect. There weren't many groups of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, that kind of stuff going on. and there's very few limited groups which were always a bit clicky. So I ended up sort of coming here and going, being introduced to it by a couple of people in town. And I went in and thought, this is kind of cool, I've been wanting to do it for a while, let's give it a go. I thought, I'll sit down, I'll play a session. I did that. I was like, that's awesome. We started with Mines of Pandelver. Next session, I was asked, do you know how to DM? So I went, no, but picked up the Mines of Pandelver, got it out, gave it a go, threw a few goblins around, carried a couple of goblin rucksacks, everyone's had a goblin rucksack, right?
Fizzlewits.
Yeah, well, Fizzlewits is, Fizzlewits, hello! Right, okay. One of my characters in the campaign. Anyway, so I got involved in it then, and I've sort of developed over quite a period now. I didn't initially start a group called Roleplay Out. I didn't initially start it, but I took it over. So Roleplay Out is a local community based on a diverse culture. Anyone's invited. It's not clicky. Anyone who's been there, I teach people to DM, all that kind of stuff. So I've really pushed the idea of getting Dungeons and Dragons out there myself. I haven't really investigated too much into the other stuff because it's another system to learn. But yeah, that is where my D&D starts. So I'll pass you on to the end of the table.
I'm Dr. Bob and I'm a role player. I've been playing since I think 1982 or 1983 when my brother came home with a handful of dice and some vague memories of this D&D thing that he played at his friend's house and sort of tried to explain the rules to us and made some stuff up and going, yeah, I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons and this is intriguing. So I went and sought out the real thing and when I went back to uni and bought my own system and since then I was hooked. So I think I started DMing pretty quickly after the whole thing kicked off because we didn't have enough DMs and there was also a sort of, yeah, I could do better than that. Also, I don't particularly like high fantasy, so I was going, science fiction game, horror game, Wild West game, and no one else would buy these things, and therefore, yeah, I was reading things I wanted to play. So I've just continued GMing and playing since then. Millions of systems. My brother, I've got two, not the brother that introduced me, the other brother, keeps a spreadsheet of how many systems he's played over the years, and how many sessions, and which GMs cancel most often. I can tell you. I'm not quite that nerdy, but I have played a lot, and I've self-published on drive-through RPG, science fiction, military science fiction scenarios, system agnostic, because I tried writing my own systems and then, this is far too much hard work, I'll just stick to running these things in GURPS or Cortex Plus or BRP or something, but the scenarios with the maps and so on, they can go out and live in the wild, be free. So that's me.
I'm Mark and I'm on the wrong panel.
Same.
So being old, I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons a la Stranger Things style by playing on the Borderlands when I was at school, and played for a few years through the kind of basic and advanced level, old style D&D. And then didn't play for a very long time. And then recently came back to playing predominantly through lockdown actually, and through the mechanism of online gaming, with one or two exceptions because we, Sam and I and some others played the campaign before that. But really I got back into being interested in it through that and through the whole process of kind of actual playthroughs online. And ended up hooking up with a couple of other podcasts to do different things, and recorded some playthroughs of Solemn Vale before it was in Kickstarter, and when it went into Kickstarter in conjunction with Matthew Dawkins, game writer, and Mark Kelly, who designed Solemn Vale, to do promo for the Kickstarter. And through that, it became really interesting to me, because as a folklorist and being very interested in the process of storytelling, the idea of gaming and storytelling and the crossover between the two was really interesting. So for me, I moved on and away from mechanisms like Dungeons and Dragons very much, which are absolutely fine and great and have their place, but away from heavy dice mechanic systems into systems which are about improvisation with dice, but improvisation with not very many dice and not very often, where they're used to inform a decision, but that's all, and the rest of it is pure storytelling. And that's where my area of interest has lay, and we've done a few of these sorts of things now. And I don't like to GM, it's not my thing, it's not something I consider myself to be the best person at. Gary made me.
You were very good. Solemn Vale was excellent.
Yeah, and because of that, and because I've now kind of become associated with Solemn Vale, and in fact, we'll come to it. The sessions of Solemn Vale that we did as a promo that Tracy and I were characters in, which are now available online. Things that happened in that, because it was pre-Kickstarter, since became canonical in the game. So there are now things in Solemn Vale which happened in our promo play of it, which now exist in the whole universe. Yeah, so that I've ended up having to do a couple of times now, because Gary made me, and then some other friends that I've just recently did an online session on Twitch of the Free League Alien RPG, which is very good, and uses similar mechanics. And they made me do a Solemn Vale one, which we're just about to start playing as well. So I GM'd a couple of times, but I prefer the other side of it.
So, talking about systems, there are many systems, hundreds, there's hundreds of systems.
Yeah.
There is that core Dungeons and Dragons, which I found very interesting that you have first and second editions, entertaining, third edition came out, and then they opened it out. And then they did fourth edition. And everybody moved away.
No fourth edition.
Yeah. But fifth edition is very much, they've done that open game license thing, and it's just exploded. I still have problems with it. But
That's what you're here for, Gary.
I know. I have a problem with D&D. Your ability to hit stuff is based on your skill level, not on your choices that you make as a character. Even more so with 5th edition. But have people got a particular? You're all role players, I'm assuming.
No.
I'm assuming. I'm hoping. If not, you want to be role players. Do we have a favourite system? What sort of things do you find? Because
I wouldn't say necessarily a favourite system, but I do find myself keep coming back to 5th edition for the simple reason that it's so easy for people to get into. It gives you a nice balance between like rolling dice for combat mechanics and for actual social role play. As you say, the whole thing of character choice is great if you've got a group that are only interested in that. But a lot of groups that I've got multiple people in every group I've played with. I've had at least one person there who wants to come along and roll dice. And that's really the main reason they're there. And they're not going to be there for something that is more a pure role-play game. And it's the inclusiveness of being able to bring everybody in. I've tried multiple different systems and we've enjoyed them. But we keep coming back to 5th edition because it's the one that everybody can play.
it's also the one that within our hobby, if you say, oh yeah, a role play, oh you mean D&D? It is the core touchstone for us. And as I said, I will always love D&D. It's not my favourite, but I will always love D&D.
Even my name's Jet. I understand the basis of roleplay games, and I got put into 5th edition as my first intro. And I found, I understand that other systems are great fun as well, because I've tried a few myself. What I found with D&D myself is it's really easy to teach. I've actually developed a system with the going to conventions like this bigger ones, where I can do a 45-minute session and teach every one of those players something about that, and they will go home and go, I want to play that. Whereas some of the other systems on my on my radar, so to speak, are not as easily put together. However, Tales of Loop and things like that really are. But some of the more complicated systems are sort of seen almost as too challenging, and your D&D 5th edition is your entry level, which is why I like it so much.
It is a gateway drug for role-playing.
It is certainly that.
Admittedly, it was Tunnels and Trolls for me, but not long after I got into Dungeons and Dragons.
But in terms of using the system for storytelling, I think Free League got it right, because Tales from the Loop, you need a few D6s and ability to tell a story,
So
and that's it.
Has everybody heard about Free League?
Yes.
Okay. Free League are a Swedish company. They've actually exploded, because what they did is they just did a few things.
Oh, is that?
Yeah. So they did a few things, and then they started getting it translated into English. And I've learned that if you want to be successful internationally with a board game, you make sure it's written in German. If you want to do it and be successful with a role-playing game, it's got to be English.
Right.
Because you're going for the American market. You can do it international, but it never breaks big until you start doing it in English. The same way, if you want a board game, you've got to do a German version, because the Germans are the biggest board games. And they did some games. I think Mutant Year Zero was their first. They had this mechanic that it's very simple. It's roll a few d6s, and it's a low mechanic system, isn't it?
That is very low.
And then they got very smart. And what they did is there's this Swedish artist called Simon Stallhag, who makes these beautiful pictures, and it's children in this world that where there's high tech, but it's often rusting and old. And they wrote, using their mechanic, a role-playing game called Tales from the Loop. And it's great for kids, because you play 10 to 15-year-old children. They can't die. You can be broken, you can be feeling
All
very
to assume death is the worst thing that can
you can be an upset angry, you can be where you can't do anything. But all you do is you go and sit with your mates in your den, or you go and see what they call an anchor. And after a while, they talk to you, they say, oh, are you okay, how's it doing? And the way they write it is it's very much it's part of including the school life. You know, in addition to chasing after lake cows, for those who've played that one, some of you will remember that. They've also got, you have to deal with the school bully, or have you done your homework. So it's very story.
Yeah.
So
and Stranger Things, they launched their game and Stranger Things came out pretty much at the same time, and there's a great deal of overlap in genre.
It's slightly less scary than Stranger Things, but then they started using the same mechanic, like a lot of companies do, for other things. And now they've tweaked it. They've now got the license for Alien, Blade Runner, which is those books should be out soon.
I've got the authors at the moment.
Yeah. But so they have really exploded, especially in the UK in the gaming market. You're starting to see their name much more often, and they've just got this mechanic light system.
Vesson became very popular.
Vesson is another one, which you introduced us to, because it's a Swedish folklore.
Yeah, so Vesson, there's again the same company teamed up with somebody else in Sweden, in this case Johan Egerkrantz, who's a Swedish author and illustrator who has published books on dragons and Swedish mythology and these sorts of things. Beautifully illustrated.
I thought he was an old, years got.
Yeah.
Is it, what's it, 30s?
Yeah, and he's a big role player.
Yeah.
He's very much into role playing as well. And it was a perfect combination, really. So they teamed up with him, used his illustrations, used all the background from his books to create this world. And if you've seen Grimm, the American thing, it's very much like that. The Vesson are what come up in a similar way in Grimm as Vason, I think they call it, but that sort of thing. It's exactly the same mechanic again as everything else, because if you didn't break, you don't fix it. And that became really, really popular because it's so beautiful to look at as well as being easy to play. And now there is a British version which is coming out as well, using British folklore and British mythology.
That's out already.
Yeah, that is just coming out. And that became really, really popular too. And they, from a humble beginning, I think, have become a very big player recently, and very much in the kind of storytelling aspect.
I think also games have evolved a lot because when I started, there weren't very many games. D&D, Gamma World, Traveller, so anything that came out, you bought it because there weren't very many of them. And God, there was a lot of terrible games that were really, really crunchy back in the days. Oh no, Twilight 2000 is a mere, kind of stripling compared to some of the, I mean, like Aftermath I bought.
Fantasy Games Unlimited.
Aftermath.
He's still selling his stuff out to the garage.
Phoenix, was it Phoenix Command? William Steele, Phoenix Command? Aftermath, I'll give you an example. With my early GMing, everyone rolled up Aftermath characters, which takes pretty much 4 hours or something to create your sodding character. And then we played a game, and it took us 3 hours to do a combat, which, if it was in a movie, it would have taken about 30 seconds to show you the action, because they had such a complicated way of how things interacted with each other.
It had a flow chart for combat.
Oh, it was when you started the action, and so if I shot you, I would be going in phase 1 of the combat, but my bullet wouldn't reach you until phase 6 of the combat, by which time Ali would have run in front of you and my bullet would hit her instead of you, and meanwhile, kind of Steve would have stabbed you in the back and you would be dead before my bullet had got to you. It's the laws of physics need not apply. And I never ran that game. I threw away half the combat. We still continued with the campaign, but it was house rule, because my friend Sandra did the tactically very sound. It was fight in the warehouse. The tactically very straight things of running out the door, running around the building to shoot the bad guys from behind, and all she got to do in that 3 hours was run round the building because the combat was so slow that like 3 rounds, and that's what games were like when I started. Whereas these days we've got games where you can we could all sit down and generate a character now and have it done in 15 minutes and be playing and have, I've run games now where in 1 3-hour session I have done 3 starship battles and they've stormed the docks on the space station in 1 session with role-playing in between. So things have evolved a huge amount.
Have you played? Sorry,
I was just thinking, talking about systems, and that's quite apropos to what we were talking about, is for those who've playing games for a long time, or we played the early stuff, they were basically war games, modified war games, which is what D&D was originally. It was just Gary Gygax and his brothers created a war game for 1-to-1. And
because they got bored with like ranks and files of armies and things like that. They wanted to know, what are these 4 guys doing? What's their story?
You look at the systems and you go, yeah, this was invented by a bunch of maths geeks who were war gamers. And there is nothing wrong with wargaming. It's not my thing, but there's nothing wrong. But it's not. And it took a long time for people to get out of that mentality.
It's also, it was waiting for the computer games industry to write the codes, and the machine in the background does all the number crunching to tell you whether you've hit the odd button. You've got the beautiful graphics and the visuals in a computer game. You're not sitting for someone to roll dice on 17 tables and cross-reference.
There are games as well that are designed purely to be something you can play as a one-shot in a couple of hours, even if you don't know the game. Have you played You Awaken in a Strange Place?
No.
So I played a game of You Awaken in a Strange Place recently online as part of a conference, the crossover between archaeology and gaming, Archaeo Gaming Con. It's all computer games and RPGs and other things that are based on archaeology. It's like as you get people doing whole talks about Assassin's Creed and the archaeology within it, but part of it, they draw on us to come in and do something stupid for a couple of hours to keep the red thing. And we played You Awaken in a Strange Place, which is like the ultimate in improvisation games. So you create a character by deciding who you're going to be, and then you're all in a group, and you have about 3 stats, which take about 2 minutes to roll up, and then each of you has to put in one aspect. So where is it going to be? And somebody stupidly suggested, I can't remember who it was, oh, it was me. Right, it's taking place in a Barbie museum, okay? National Barbie Museum in London was the location. We have to get archaeology into this somewhere. And then somebody else put in another aspect, and somebody else put in another aspect. That's the first that the GM knows of the whole thing. The GM then has 5 minutes to construct the game. Okay? 5 minutes later, then you start improvising your game, and you have we have 2 hours to complete it from start to finish. And that is a brilliant introduction to gaming for anybody who isn't particularly familiar with it, because you've got like 3 stats that take a couple of minutes to roll up, 5 minutes to decide on a scenario, and then you just go for it and make stuff up. And it was bizarre and hilarious, and somebody's character was actually the sentient building that we were in. Somebody played the building. It was, you know, very odd.
I had 2 questions over here.
Okay.
One of the systems that I want to like and yet can't quite is the Doctor Who role-playing game.
Yes.
Oh, I like that.
I like it in principle. I dislike that 50% of people can't open an envelope with a paperclip on it. But most of all, the biggest problem is that if you're following the television format, you have one player who's going to have quite a lot of fun, and a lot of players who are going to go, what are we doing now, Doctor?
Yeah.
I can answer that, because the first thing is you don't have a Time Lord in it.
Yes.
It's the first thing.
Oh yeah, if you make it unit or something like that, you're a lot
if
better
you
off.
just, yes,
Or
you
the
have
passers-by drawn into a
So
thing.
I've had people when there's no Time Lords. I've run a unit campaign. I've had a friend who did a thing where they had a useless beginning Time Lord who knew nothing, and another Gallifreyan who was the person who'd been sent in to service the TARDIS when someone accidentally pressed the wrong button and they all got whisked off.
Yeah.
So the TARDIS repair technician. And then my friend Alan ran a very successful Doctor Who campaign which was entitled The 5 Doctors. So they were all playing the Doctor.
And it is that kind of thing, like Alistair said, when you've got one person who just wants to roll dice and kill things, and you've got somebody else who is there for the story,
But
balancing those needs.
Yeah, I like the Cubicle 7 version of Doctor Who. There's been various systems of it, because it's a system matters game in that they've tailored their system to fit in with how the show works. As most role-playing games like D&D and Call of Cthulhu and so on, combat is, once you get into combat, the fighting, roughy-tufty, you know, it becomes all about the fight. They've tailored it so if the Daleks, you know, are shouting exterminate, exterminate, stuff is happening, Doctor Who does things in a different order, and it's talkers go first, movers go next, people who are doing technical stuff go next, and then and only then does the fighty shooty stuff happen, which explains, it's basically the Daleks shout exterminate, exterminate, that's talking, and the Doctor will yell out something. Movers is one companion will scream. Screaming has a negative effect on the bad guys as well. There's a game mechanic for it. That anyone who hears the scream is at -2 for their dice roll. Some companions will run away, and the Daleks will rumble into the room. The Doctor will do something clever with a sonic screwdriver, and then and only then the Daleks will shoot. And by this time, the Daleks are at huge minuses because they have talked -2. They have moved -2. The companion has screamed -2. They did something technical has happened, blah, blah, blah. And so the Daleks are about -8 to shoot, which explains why the Daleks never ever hit them. And it's all set up that the person who's talking can shout out something and the Daleks might not get to the shooting because you have bamboozled them or whatever. And it's also got mechanisms that the GM just goes, you've all been captured by the Daleks. Everyone has story points as compensation for we don't roleplay that bit where you all fight to the death, bloody regardless, and that you just cut to, you've all been captured, have story points as a reward. So,
I was going to say, I have a point to address that, but we still have a question over here that wasn't asked.
My name's David, and I used to roleplay. I wanted to make a quick point, and then I've got quite a long question. Gary was talking about wargamers in first D&D. All new media tends to imitate the previous media. So when films were invented, they were literally plays, and they didn't use the camera. Cinema was going to use the camera. I would say role-playing was invented when 5th edition came out, and we invested the dungeon. It's just that point.
5th edition has been, in my opinion, sort of, I've watched role-playing, and I've been role-playing for a long time, and I saw it, and it was low-key. Partly, 3rd edition came along. First edition just hit shit. Sorry, children. 2nd edition was hit stuff. But we got a few skills tagged onto the site. They really were, and I've role-played with somebody who uses 2nd edition, never uses skills. It's in there. I've got skill, never used them. 3rd edition was the first one to bring skills in, but it also, because Wizards of the Coast allowed that open license, people started gaming suddenly went, ooh, opened it up a little bit more.
I think you're forgetting there was a whole ton of other games that had skills.
Yeah, I know.
So what D&D just was.
Yeah, but what we're talking about the back to the touchstone, the beginning of many gamers' careers. But it was noticeable going to conventions that when 3rd edition came out, suddenly there were many other systems, but something changed. I felt a change in the gaming world. And 5th edition has allowed that, but it's also, you're right, I don't know if it happened at the same, if it's just coincidence that at the time these things happen, other things are happening. It's now, again, 5th edition came out, Freely, Modifius, other companies were starting to come in, and it's just exploded even more so. That's the feeling I get with role-playing. There was always...
I think roleplay has gotten bigger now, but more visible maybe. So it's always been there.
Yeah.
But it's just, in days of past, there was a kind of a way people looked at gaming, right? They looked at it like, oh, they're geeks, so we'll leave it, right? That's how they sort of look at it initially. But nowadays, people become much more accepting to how people want to do things like that and play games like this. D&D has opened up a universe in which, at 5th edition, which I've understood, has opened up a universe in which people can be more free. I also wanted to point out on the question about balancing. In D&D, the balancing comes directly from the DM. So for me, when I'm trying to get the party to do what I would like them to do, and you've got your fighty people, and you've got your sort of like, I want to do a bit of role play. So I always do a bit of a balancing act. So I sort of balance the idea of a bit of role play, a bit of combat, a bit more role play, and see how the story progresses. I also allow, much more freely now with the D&D setting, people to introduce their own ideas. So, for example, I had a house back in this town, and that's where I come from. All right, and then maybe it might continue in an aspect from that. So, but the balancing point is about understanding how to control your players in a way. So it's not actually about you're fighting people who just want to fight. It's actually controlling that idea and making it that they get their turn, they get their time, but actually introducing the role play aspect, which is the more important part of the actual game, in the aspect, because that's what people really want to do. Is like, they want to role play a character. I want to be this big barbarian, right? Well, role play it for me. How do you want to do this thing? In regards to actions like it's just fighty, punchy, trashy, you know, I actually change that slightly. So if somebody comes up with a really cool concept, like I want to jump off this roof and I want to slash down on this guy, right, I will get them to roll a check on that, and then allow them, that's a free check, and allow them a tack on it, to give them the opportunity to roleplay that character the way that they want to roleplay it. So that's how I kind of try to balance the campaigns a bit more. And so I wanted to just come back to that because I missed my chance to say it earlier. But yeah, I do understand where that comes in. So now I've said my part.
You've just described the rule of cool,
Yeah.
which I assume everyone is familiar with that? Yeah. Okay.
I would also say, I mean, what you were saying about D&D, Gary, so there's other fashions in the outside world that impinge, because my experience, I went to GameSoc at Bristol University for many years, and for a long time, every year, freshers turn up, they come to GameSoc, the introductory games, and it was always, a lot of newbies would turn up and go, I want to play D&D and Call of Cthulhu next year. Want to play D&D and Call of Cthulhu next year. Wanted, you know, all the newbies, they'd heard of these two games, so that's what they wanted to do. And then suddenly, Vampire came out, and suddenly, instead of getting, I mean, I'm called Dr. Bob, because when I joined GameSoc, I was the only woman that went to, it was war games and board game and RPG soc. I was the only woman that went, so they named me Bob, as in Blackadder. And then I graduated in Dr. Bob. But so it was, millions of blokes want to play D&D and Cthulhu, etc., etc. And then Vampire came out, and then suddenly we had like 50,000 goth women join the society wanting to play Vampire. And that was the trend for a few years, and then Vampire fell out of fashion, and it went back to, you know, kind of folk turning up wanting to, I think, I can't remember, third edition of D&D came out, and so on. So there's outside world trends as well there.
Yeah.
I think the last 10 years we've seen a sort of greatly increased acceptance of tabletop games in all their forms.
Yeah.
Whether it be board games, role-play games, there just seems to be more general interest all round.
Well, you can see it on YouTube now.
Yeah.
If you, before it was, what's this Dungeons and Dragons thing? I don't know anything about it.
The advent of social media, the whole concept of crowdfunding has, many companies would have just done it and then sold it. Many big professional companies now, their go-to now is crowdfunding. Before, so what it means is they've got enough money to make this book before. One of the things I think is a big influence in the way things have gone is the people who are running the companies, and you see this in the film industry as well, the people who are the power now are our age. They are the ones, you look at all the biggest films now, geeky films, you look at the people who are making them, Kevin Feige, Jon Favreau, people like that were...
Did you say our age? Do you mean our age, or do you mean like the...
No, I mean, I'm talking, not you. I mean, but the people, they're sort of in their late 40s, early 60s. They're the people who are the power brokers in the entertainment industry now. They are all, and you look at them, especially the ones that are doing the biggest geeky stuff like Marvel, DC, all those. These are the guys who were us as little nerdy kids. One trying to find, sitting down and watching any science fiction that was available or fantasy. Now they have the power, and in the gaming world it's the same guys. The guys who are now running these are the guys who sat down in the late 70s, early 80s, looked at these funny dice and went, oh, this looks interesting, what can I do? Yeah. So now they've gone, okay, we will produce this for you. We have the experience. Let's look at other things. David, sorry.
Well, I've got quite a long question. So
okay.
No, I was pointing out, I was going to say a short.
Oh, right. Really, I started this panel because I have a question. Why do you need these systems? My experience at Birmingham University, Game 3, we did 3rd edition D&D, and then we switched to RuneQuest. And then we dumped that. I went freeform. A guy called Andrew Willstone did interactive fiction, which was academic journalism. And I do know that one of his things was people at Birmingham University are doing interesting things. We did, a guy called Michael Beijing and myself started to do GMing both of us in the same game, because the games got so big more than the GM couldn't cope. And we had 30 people running up and down the student union. And our system was you chose a major and a minor skill. And then we ignored that for the rest of the day. Which comes back to something Mark said. I remember famously one guy said to me, I'd like to have spider sense. Well, a game I had planned had nothing to do with superheroes or anything, and I said, very horrified, knowing that we can never use it again. And he comes to these weird, he's in a dangerous situation, and the guy goes, wait, I've got a skill. And he says, oh yeah, skills. For the first time in like months. And he's like, I've got spidey sense. What does that do? And I said, well, your spidey sense tells you that you're in a very dangerous situation. Thanks for that. But really what we illustrated was we had one game where we were doing a lot of running about, and Michael Allen had these various things. And some players had gone off to do their own thing.
Is this LARP?
No, it's not LARP. It was role playing. There was a LARP group who was for the enemy. This was tabletop role playing, but we moved around. You know, it's like doing script reading, but you stand up and walk it around. So if we would go to a space ship, we would go into that corner of the room, sort of thing. And these two guys came to me and said, look, Dave, sorry, we do actually need a GM this bit. I went across and they're, okay, what's going on? I said, well, I'm chasing him across these warehouse breeds. Warehouses? What the hell? That's not in the game at all. But they've been doing this about half an hour. And he said, I want to jump this warehouse across to the roof of the next warehouse. And I said, well, it's a long way. He said, yes, it is. That's okay. Are you going to go for it? He said, yes, I'm going to go for it, he said. I said, okay. I said, what happened? He went, I didn't make it. I fell to my death. Okay, well, you carry on now. And I went back to the other room. The system had gone. We were using the tables and the roll of dice that you have in your head. If you can imagine the scene, you make the jump because your character would, and then you can't do it and you die. Why do you use this?
I don't think you need a system. One of my favourite games I've ever played was a free-form cyberpunk game where Marcus Rowland, for those who know, screwed us over. It was genius, pure genius. No system at all. For me, I think it gives you a bit of structure. It helps the GM sometimes. It's not necessary, it's just easier.
It also allows somebody to step straight in.
We didn't get to that point straight away. We did spend months getting to that point.
So what are you saying? So we're
I'm saying having a system allows somebody to just step in and go, I can make it this week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll know how their character works.
For me, I mean, I work with systems better because I like a checklist. You know, I like to go through systems. It doesn't mean that I can't create my own world out of it. So, for example, as I'm a D&D eccentric, of course, I have utilised the rules system and created my own bad guys so that I confuse people like Alistair over here and what I'm actually putting up against.
Or someone who just learned the entire monster manual. Yeah.
I'll be daring for sort of...
Yeah, of course. And you're going to have people like that in your gaming groups from time to time. So, yeah.
And for me, though, the systems allow me to direct my ideas or my thoughts on that process. It says I've got a list of numbers or skills that I can say, right, that's a skill check for this. So, whereas if I didn't have that system, I'd be sort of walking in the dark, I guess. Because even though I can create the idea that you need to do a death and just forge your death, essentially, I don't see how I then consistently would progress that system. I would just see that,
But I started off back in the 80s, Red Box D&D. First and second. Yeah, I didn't introduce myself, did I? Stephen Marion, we went way back with the original ones.
We met playing D&D.
Yeah. But then when I had Jamie, it was a lot harder to make external events or have people round or whatever. And my backup to keep my sanity during that period was simming. So it was online, collaborative story writing, role play, combination. So fundamentally, you're in this position on the starship, or the Stargate crew. I started with the Stargate one. So if you're the engineer, you know engineering things. There were no numbers. There was no, you know, this many engineering things. It was just, if there's something engineering, it's you. If that was the extent of that, your skill base. And it was very much, as you say, that as long as the people in it know the limits and everybody's effectively agreed how you're doing this, it's lovely. If you get someone who comes on and goes, I am fantastic at everything and I'm going to get in there first,
Yeah.
which we nicknamed superhero syndrome.
Yeah.
They were dicks. But what we used to do was we would demonstrate to them quite quickly and easily that it was more fun not to be. We would demonstrate, you know what, I think I'm walking into a trap, but guess what, I'm going to do it anyway because it'll be fun.
I've got a question. Yeah. Have any of you ever tried the system Amber, which causes total dices?
I haven't tried a dice system myself. I can imagine things and create ideas. I just find it easier having a system personally, and I think it's different for every person who DMs and does that.
I have not tried that one specifically, but I have done other diceless systems, and the point I was going to make actually with regards to what David was saying is that the reason why, generally speaking, there are systems in the first place with this sort of thing is, and I can speak to this from a person who's had a bit of formal training with improv, is that most role-playing of any kind is improv-based to a certain extent. And not everybody who is a role player is an actor or a person who has a background in performance even. I would go so far as to say even now most people who play them aren't. But what the system does, or it allows you to do, is it gives you a little bit of a framework with which to jump from when you are making a decision about what your character would do, or the world in which you exist, or how you interact with that world. The way that GMs or games that require them to do is they are there to be ultimately the person with whom the buck stops in terms of what the collaborative storytelling is doing. Like for example, if we use D&D as an example, that you might have a character that says, right, I jump up into the sky, grab the sun, and pile drive it into the cohort in front of me. Well, obviously, if you allow a player to do that, it kind of breaks the world and destroys the stakes of the situation that you've placed people in. So you need a person with, who has the final say to go, all right, no, you can't do that, but, and it is very much based on the improv principle of either you yes and or you no but something.
I think that Mando did something.
Yeah.
I was just, the latest question, kind of what my answer to that is, different people enjoy different things, and different people will tolerate or are comfortable with different things. So the Aftermath game that I hated, because combats took 3 hours to play out, there are people who for whom that is heaven. And the improv stuff, I remember a Fiasco game that we were doing at GameStop, where you take turns and everyone has to, it's your turn to create a scene, what's your scene about, and then so on and so forth. And we had one player that every time it was his turn, rabbit in the headlights. He just, and I was sort of going, okay, you obviously can't think of anything. And I went, it's all right, I need to go to the loo and I need to go to the shop to get another drink. Does anyone want anything? So I went to the toilets and went downstairs and went to the shop and bought some cans of Coke and came back up, and he still hadn't thought of anything because he was just terrified of doing it, and eventually went, I'll go for the option where someone else thinks of it and it's going to be bad, because, you know, and it's just, improv was not his thing. He wanted some dice to tell him, you know, he would be able to say, I'll try and jump to the next warehouse. but he could not create a scene where the reason they were running across the warehouse roofs was X because of Y, and the person chasing him was Z. That was just not in his comfort zone. And my thing, if I'm writing, sorry, I'm getting if I'm writing a story, you know, as a short story or whatever, I will chuck tons of emotion into it and put these characters through the ringer and all the rest of it. I find if I'm role-playing, there's a certain level of emotion I get to and I just shut down and I am not wanting to perform that as a thing. I just don't like it. Again, that means I'm, you know, so there's the guy that can't improv, and there's me where I'm limited in how much improv I can do. Also, I'm shit at accents, so if I do accent, you get my patent
Scottish one.
But yeah, you get my patented Australian, Welsh, Pakistani accent. Yeah, so that's fine. Over to Mark.
I was just trying to sort of address what David was saying about mechanics. Sometimes a mechanic can be important, but only very occasionally, in my opinion. So, for example, going back again to Solemn Vale, and I will tell you later what it is. There are really only two reasons for rolling the dice. You need to challenge a skill for some reason. In life, you need to challenge your own ability to do something to see whether you succeed or fail. And in the game, you do that. The other reason for rolling a dice, really, is if you have a group of people and you want to randomly, by chance, see which one is affected by a particular situation. Those are the two reasons. That's pretty much it. I think, for me, any dice mechanic which pulls you out of the immersion of the story is too much dice mechanic.
Yes.
Or
So
third, scare the living daylights out of your players.
Oh, you can do that without a dice.
All you have to do is smile at the player.
Well,
You did what?
again, between those 2 points, coming back to the whole idea of structure, in fact, I've had people that have been incredibly intimidated by improv, that are there to roll dice. But one of the most glorious moments of the D&D is when you get them to come out of their shell. They need that structure in place. They can't operate without it, but that structure gives them the confidence eventually to do proper improv, proper role play. And those moments when they come out of their shell actually really, they suddenly engage, they're interacting. That's kind of the best moments for it. And you can't get that without the structure because you can't get those people to come out of their shell without that there in the first place.
I found that with the society, only your part of course, there's always been a few people who have been a bit kind of limited on how they feel when it comes to trying to improv, as you say. We have a couple of younger members who are very, very challenging in the way that they can learn and do things. So by introducing a system that they can understand and learn, and as numbers, they can then direct their ideas of how that works. Whereas some of us could just go, yeah, let's go and fly in the air and, you know, become a raven, whatever. But with certain members, it's happened quite a few times as well. They need, as Alice was saying, they need that structure to understand how that works. So as much as it's fun to jump into this world that has no dice or no books or anything to go by, it's a great concept, but it just doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah, some people are really good at it. Some people can just improvise, they don't need dice, but there are many people who need that. Yeah, and it is that fear. Yeah, is if you don't have, and there are people. I role play, and pretty much all the people I'm working with are teachers, and one of them's a drama teacher. His son is just there to roll dice and hit stuff. He enjoys it. He has a great time. He turns up. We're all improvising, role playing, having a great time. He just wants to hit stuff. Admittedly, he's sort of 17, 18. He's in that I want to kill everything stage. And
that's quite late. Usually there's 12-year-olds
no, I've had 17, 18-year-olds, but yeah. One of the things I will say, no matter what the system, the most important thing is the GM. Yes. I have played and I've been in games where I've been the GM and I've been really rubbish. and I know I've been rubbish, but we've all played in games where the GM is not very good. No matter how good the system, no matter how freeing the system is, it's still going to be a bad game. But a good GM can take a horrible system and make it work, usually by going, yeah, let's get rid of that. I played the original FASA Star Trek system. First thing I did, action points. Those out. I ran a Buffy for many years, and this actually is, as a GM, was my best ever GM moment. I ran a Buffy. It was loosely based on the Vampire Masquerade system. Somebody house ruled it. We then came along and house ruled it. We house ruled it to the extent that when we tried to start it again, we couldn't do it because we had adapted it over the years of constantly playing it. And we go, how did this go? I can't remember. But my best moment was, as a GM, was I was sitting in a group and the scenario got where somebody had to have a conversation with the Slayer. You know, one of the trainee watcher needed to talk to the Slayer and to have that type of conversation. I did nothing. It was a 2.5 hour session. I did nothing. I sat and watched my players role play. Was the best moment as a GM, because I personally think the less you do, the better as a GM. You know, there's sometimes when you have to do a lot.
Also, you need a system that supports what the players, the players' concepts, and what it says on the back of the game about the players are X who do Y. So they are ninjas who do amazing stunts. If you've got a system where they've only got a 25% chance of doing anything, that system does not match the expectations. So you need, you know, if it says you can leap tall buildings in a single bound, you need to have like a 95% chance of leaping tall buildings. Otherwise, you know, you're playing the Keystone Cops. You're not playing as Avengers Assemble.
And sometimes virtually no system can produce the best results.
No.
Didn't Tracy run a game of Shia LaBeouf that genuinely terrifies you?
Oh, it was brilliant.
Yeah,
and
that's so virtually no system
at all.
I
know. And I really loved doing the one I did at the con, when we were in the hotel. It was just sheer genius. Yeah, you can have a minimal system. And as I've got older, I like less and less mechanic to get in the way of the story. But that's me getting an older. I tried running. For anybody who's tried it, I tried running Shadowrun. Even my players hate, because we got to the stage of any version. I've played several versions, and this is the 5th edition. I think it's just horrible, because you have to, as a GM, you have to remember 3 complicated systems. There's one for combat, one for magic, one for tech, and none of them, they're not one system. There's multiple systems. I don't mind rolling a bucket load of dice. That's fine. It's just it. But anyway, as I've got older, I've liked simpler systems, which is why Simon Burley's stuff, the code system, I love. The free league stuff. Simple.
I like the quicker system.
Yeah.
I don't mind if it's got a bit of crunch, but I want the combat to take 10 minutes, not an hour, because I get bored of long combats.
And talking of an hour.
And talking of an hour.
Yes. So I hope you've enjoyed it at least.
Roll a d20, see if you've enjoyed it.
Yeah. And we're happy to continue with the conversation later on. And
Thank the panel.